Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Game Changers Experience live show. If you're listening to me, do me a favor. If you're listening to me live, use the hashtag live, use the hashtag replay. That'd be super awesome. And if you're listening to me here, by the way, do me a favor and just do a PLC post, like, or comment in the comment section below. Here we go. There it is. So today's episode is all about, are you aligned with vision? And so I kind of like want to share some context as to how I kind of came up with the idea of today's show. And I want to quickly share a quick story because this week has been quite a bit of an eye-opener. Now, again, depending on when you're listening to this episode, of course, is going to probably depend on what sort of context you're taking this. But, beginning of 23, which is this week, of course. And I had a bit of I suppose, I'm going to call it an epiphany, right? But first of all, I want to quote my friend Sammy Blendell, because Sammy she was one of the first catalysts for me to really help me to really figure out, well, not just figure out, but just to make sure that I'm in the right lane. Does that make sense? So I came up, I don't know about you guys, but when you're going through the Christmas period, you've probably gone through a time of reflection. You probably, you're going out of the starting blocks and you're coming up with some new ideas. And some of the things, and so I've written down some different ideas about how to grow the business and things like that, but this week is really interesting, right? So I kind of asked Sammy for some advice, because that's what we do, right? We've known each other a long time. And what was really fascinating about the conversation is she said to me, she was like, is this a luncheon vision? And it kind of got me thinking, and I didn't think much of it, because what I've been doing is I've been working this week very much on what I call the foundational part of the business, right? Which is, writing out my strategy for the year, planning it all, making that I've got all the systems in places, make sure that I've got all of the right infrastructure that I need to make sure my team has everything that they can do to, record our results and things like that. So we can, basically measure key metrics and stuff like that. So we can have all the basic things in place. Does that make sense? And so I've been working on that sort of strategy piece, because I normally spend a good amount of time on that. And so it wasn't until the next day I was actually listening in to a great webinar with Dan Priestley. Now, if you don't know, Dan is multiple sort of award-winning author, written things like The Key Person of Influence. He's written oversubscribed kids books, numerous different books as well. But I was on a webinar with him with 300 other people. And it was interesting because it was going through not only were we going through things like scorecards and AI and various other topics and stuff like that, but there was some really interesting advice that Dan was giving out, and it really hit a bit of an epiphany more than anything else. I don't know if you guys ever had those epiphanies when you're listening to someone acutely and deeply, right? It's like, oh wow, I didn't really kind of think of it like that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and so then I kind of looked back to the plans that I had for 23, or a couple of the plans that I had for 23, and they had no correlation whatsoever, or they didn't really have. They were completely what I call off track from what I wanted to achieve. Does that make sense? And so I don't know if you've ever kind of self-sabotaged this yourself, where you've come up with an idea or whatever it might be, and it's completely off track to what your vision is. But one of the reasons I wanted to jump on here really, really quickly is I wanted to give you guys some tips about how to really kind of first of all, how to align your vision. How do you get a vision in the first place? Because my belief is that you really have to start with the foundational part of the business, or you even think about really the business strategy side of stuff, the marketing and the branding and all of that juicy stuff. You really got to think about the vision side of stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about vision today. That was the real purpose. But before we get started, I know we've got a few people listening in to us live. Do me a favor, if you're listening to me live, use the hashtag replay, use the hashtag live. That would be super awesome. And if you are listening to me live, do me a favor, PLC, post, like, or comment in the comments section below. If you've got any questions, use the comments in the comment section below. If you're listening to this on the podcast, of course, please welcome. I'm glad that you're here. If this is the first time that you're listening to the podcast, congratulations. I hope that you enjoy not just today's episode, but also some of the past episodes that we've done in the past. We've got over 200 episodes of the Game Changers experience. So let's jump straight in, guys. Let's jump straight in. So how do we, first of all, how do we get some clarity with regards to your vision, right? Well, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what are you ultimately passionate about? Like, what really gets you fired up? It's interesting because each individual that's listening in, right, it's gonna have a different knock-on effect to different people, right? So some of you may, you may be, I don't know, financial advisors. So therefore you might be really passionate about helping people save or make money, right? So that might be a passion. It might be that you have a passion for, I don't know, helping children, illiterate children, read better, right? So that might be a passion of yours. It might be that you have a passion with regards to, educating people around their intellectual property, right? So that might be a passion of yours, right? My passion, specifically my passion, is all about how I can help companies, leaders and entrepreneurs in professional services, how can I help them to gain more clarity so they can create more purpose and impact for the future. So that's kind of like my purpose. Like, that's my passion. That's what I really enjoy doing. For some of you guys that don't know me, I started my first business at the age of 11. So doing this is, it's so important. I want to give a big shout out to Sarah Franklin. Sarah's amazing, by the way. If you have anyone in the motorsport industry, if you're a driver, listen, by the way, Sarah has not paid me to do this, right? It's only because she's a rock star and I love her to bits. But listen, go check her out. She's awesome. But yeah, super important, as Sarah said. It's such an important part with regards to the starting point. But what are you ultimately passionate about, right? So if it is racing fast cars, then great, fantastic. Leave it as that. Think about what you're passionate about. So that's the first thing. That's the very, very first question you need to ask yourself is, what is your passion about, right? Secondly, okay, is there a market for what you want to do? Okay, so for example, well, in fact, let's use Sarah, right? So when Sarah came to me a couple of years ago, right, and she said to me, well, I'm doing family law, but my real passion is racing fast cars. Great. Is there a market for racing fast cars? Can we turn that into a business? And if so, okay, prove it to me. Show me the stats. Show me the statistics. Is there a market? And if so, what are the problems that you're trying to solve for your clients? What is it what are their big pain points? What are the things that keeps them up at night? This sounds really basic stuff, but sometimes we have to go back to basics in terms of foundations before we even thinking about marketing, before we even think about branding. We have to go back to basics, and it absolutely flabbergasts me about the fact that, foundations are completely overlooked in business, right? You have to start with foundations first, because without the foundations, everything else becomes, when you've got those foundations in place, I'm telling you now, everything else becomes so much more easier. It doesn't feel like you're going consistently uphill and struggling, like a lot of people do. You've got to make sure you've got to get that core foundational part in place. So that's the second question I want to ask you is, is there a market for it? Okay. If there is a market, great. Have you done some research? Have you put out some signals out there? What do I mean by signals? Well, what I mean by that is, am I asking questions? So for example, it might be, a really simple question could be something like, have you ever encountered, or have you ever encountered, say for example, you're in motorsport, have you ever encountered a problem with, I don't know, with the person that you're driving for, you know? So thinking about like what people are experiencing and what their problems are, you know, what would be a really good question? What would be a really good signal? You know, so is it that some of your clients struggle with networking? Is it that the fact that your clients struggle with managing their finances? I don't know, right? What would be a really good question to ask them? What would be a really good feeler for those individuals? So if you start putting out signals and you start putting feelers out there, what you start to do is you start to get a little bit of traction. You start to build some rapport. And, you know, and I feel like that's really, really super important. So when it comes to your vision, right? If you're in the market for, I don't know, we all love to help people, right? But in my case, because I love to help people grow their business, right? That's my thing, right? That's what I love to do. So in my case, now I have a vision, right? Now I'm going to go back to the deeper part right here, okay? When we talk about vision, what I want you to think about is, where do you see yourself in the next 10 years, right? What is the legacy piece to what you want to achieve, okay? Because if it's because at the end of the day, if you can't think 10 years ahead of you, right? Or even 5 years ahead of you, or even 50 years ahead of you, right? If you can't think of that legacy piece of the reason why you're actually here on this earth, that's where you've got to start. If you can't get that clarity, you've got to start from that first, because otherwise you just don't have a purpose. There isn't a strong enough why. Otherwise, it's going to feel like taking on a full-time job, right? But there's just no enthusiasm for it. Do you know what I mean? It's like that you just there's just like kind of there's no rocket fuel. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just kind of weird, right? But anyway, so what is the legacy piece? What do you want? How do you want to make people feel? A bit like going back to personal branding, which again, really super important. Trust, building trust, especially in this day and age, really super important. 23. In fact, it's going to be even more important to build trust in 23 as we go forward. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention here, and this is just something that I suppose I had my epiphany when I had this epiphany this week, was horizontal and vertical thinking. So what do I mean by that? So what I mean by that is when we think of say a particular industry, just say for example say you're a lawyer, right? Say you're a lawyer and you're in one lane, right? So you're in one lane in your practice, okay? So that is your vertical, right? So that is your vertical. Now, in order to go horizontal, I could offer different products, services that could say be in commercial law, property law. I could go into different types of law, and then I could create my own different verticals. Does that make sense? Now, where it comes a little bit sticky is we don't go down the vertical. What we do is we just keep going horizontal. Does that make sense? So we keep going from one thing to the next, okay? And eventually you've got like this big, massive horizontal line of different remits of, you know, what exactly you offer. But then it completely detracts you from your vision. So the best thing what I would advise you to do is to pick one from your horizontal part and go vertical. All right. So go deep in that vertical. How can you go deep in that vertical? Very, very simple. Okay. So in my case, when it comes to helping people grow their business, one of the verticals, or one of the things that I've identified, is, you know, putting on special private events, right? Which we're going to do in the spring. So we're going to start doing private dining events in the spring. And the reason we're going to do that is purely because what I do is intimate, right? We have to build this intimacy. My clients have to trust me. Same if you're in professional services. It's the same if you're in any service-driven industry. You've got to be able to build this, this deep connection with your clients, because if you don't, what's going to happen is there's going to be trust down the line, but also they're not going to hang around. You're not going to create that loyalty. You're not going to create retention that you desperately need in a business. Now, again, depending on how many clients you actually want to work with over a set period of time. Like for me, I don't want to work with lots of clients. I actually choose who I want to work with. For some people, they don't want to do that, right? They choose to work with a large amount of clients, and that's entirely up to them, right? But I want you to think about like quality over quantity, okay? So, would you prefer to work with a client or a number of clients which really appreciate what you do? They pay you what you're worth, okay? And you don't have to bust your balls in order to make them happy. Or would you prefer to focus on the larger numbers, which is absolutely fine too, right? But again, your profit margin might be slightly smaller. So again, thinking about like, quality over quantity, how many clients could you take on, right, as a business, right? And how could you, and can you give them the level of happiness? And I'm not going to call it satisfaction, because actually everyone has a standard of feeling satisfied, but they need to feel wowed when they work with you. Does that make sense? And so if that number is 20, if that number is 50, if that number is 100, or it might be something really specific, it could be something like 73 or whatever random number you come up with. But what is the ideal amount of clients or customers that, provided that you can give them that wow experience, okay, what is that actual number, okay? And if it goes over that number, right, then it's going to cause this kind of what I call integrity rift. Do you know what I mean? And, in terms of my core values, like integrity is one of those highest ones. Integrity is important to me. I want to make sure that my clients are happy. My clients are going to walk away with a smile on their face, and they're going to feel like they're not only being looked after, but they have this kind of like wow factor. It's like, wow, I never thought about that. Wow. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like this exponential experience and stuff. So anyway, I feel like I'm waffling a little bit. Anyway, so this was what I discovered this week, basically in a nutshell. So let's quickly wrap up from in terms of vision, right? So core foundational part, how do you get a vision? Firstly, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what are you passionate about? So that's the first thing. What are you passionate about? Are you passionate about, are you passionate about the gym and getting healthy? Are you passionate about, I don't know, helping people lose weight? Are you passionate about, are you passionate about people's finances? Are you passionate about, I don't know, getting children more energetic? I don't know what you're passionate about, okay? So thinking about what you're passionate about. Number two, is there a market for it in terms of your passion? Can you turn that into an actual business? Even if you're in a business right now, okay, and you're just not sure what the vision is around your business, okay, this is a really good exercise. I kid you not, okay, because all of your Google ads spend, all your Facebook ads, and all your marketing spend that you put in right now, if you don't have that vision in your head, or you don't know where you're going to go with it, that means your team are completely disjointed. They don't know where they're going. They don't know how they're going to get there. They have this lack of direction from you in terms of your leadership. It's really important. You've got to create that vision. Vision is it's a bit like a foundation that you need before putting up a house. Because if you don't have the foundation, then guess what? The house is going to fall down, right? It's exactly the same premise. So is there a market for it? Can it be monetized? Is kind of like the third part of it. What research have you done? So and what signals are you putting out there? So like, what core questions are you asking your audience? What media channels are you putting out there? So are you on LinkedIn, for example? Are you consistently putting content out there? Are you asking questions? Are you asking for interactions and engagements? Really, it's super important. And then the last thing really is about horizontal and vertical thinking. So pick a vertical, stick to it, go deep on that vertical, and explore about how you can become successful within that vertical. Okay. And again, I use Sarah Franklin as a really good example of this. We take her family law, okay, her family law business. She's become successful in that, but her passion's in motorsport. Let's take that, turn it into a big vertical. She's now got two verticals, family law and motorsport law. Now, if she wanted to, effectively, she could just stay within that, okay, and just go as deep as you want within those verticals, or you could open up another one and replicate the success from the 2 previous verticals. So it's about making sure that you're staying in your lane, okay? Not coming up with weird and wonderful ideas which detracts you from your actual main vision. So important, okay? Because I came up with a couple of ideas, and my friend Sammy, she's like, no. Does it align to your value, to your vision? And then it wasn't, like I said, it was just kind of the universe, and it was just, there were 2 signals that the universe sent to me, and I'm like, okay, I get it now. Do you know what I'm saying? I get it now. Anyway, listen, I hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed being on here as well, and I loved some of the interaction on here with you guys as well. If you're listening in on the podcast, do me a favor. If you want to drop me an email, if you're finding it really difficult with your vision, actually, what I was going to say to you guys, we've got a great gift for you. We've got our scorecard called the Business Growth Scorecard. And if you want to learn more about how you can find, how you can identify which area of business that you need to grow, okay, whether it be in leadership, whether it be in energy, whether it be in vision, fill in the Business Growth Scorecard. It is actually, I'm going to put a link here for you guys that are listening in, actually. So it's here, how to grow a business. So it's down here on the at the bottom of the page. And for you guys, we'll put the link in the podcast so that you can fill in the scorecard and you can identify which part of the business that you need to make improvements to. This is going to help you, just give you some focus and direction. But it's also, otherwise, sometimes it's going to feel like, you've got to either start from scratch, or, you've got to be everywhere and anywhere, or try and figure it out on your own. But a scorecard is great because it gives you core metrics, but also gives you it identifies the area of your business where you're best suited to focus on. So I hope this has been particularly useful anyway in today's episode. Really enjoyed today's episode for you guys. I'm going to be back on here again, of course, on a much more regular basis now, moving into 23 and beyond. Listen, hope you have a great weekend or great week whenever you're listening to this, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.